All right, so good morning and welcome to the American Master Socratic Seminar. And Mr. Short is with us as well. So I like it that we're combining the two classes because that gives us more people to talk to and hear more opinions about what's going on. So now I don't think this is all that necessary under the circumstances. It just is if you're in a noisy environment. It What happens is when you hear somebody, it automatically switches the picture over. But I'm not hearing any problems with any background noises right now. So this may not be necessary. But if it does get noisy where you're at, just mute your mic until you want to speak and then just unmute it. Okay. All right. So seminar rules. Obviously, there's no hand raising since we're not all in the same place together. It doesn't make any difference. You guys are having a discussion, and hopefully, I would like to be able to kind of step out as much as possible. I want this to be your seminar. We know that Luke is going to need to be typing comments into the chat box, but if you feel uncomfortable speaking, you may do the same. And the discussion is designed to help you discuss the issue. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look at the materials and kind of do a little analysis of the three speakers we'll be looking at. But what we really want is when you are speaking about something, make sure that you're backing it up with the material from the textbook. It's okay to disagree. In fact, those are the best conversations is when you have disagreements. Just make sure that you're respectful and that you back up your questions with support. Okay, so what I wanted to do was show you first the topic that this is going to lead you to so we can kind of focus our discussion. So in order to start a revolution, people must be persuaded to give up the routine of their lives, no matter how bad. Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, and Thomas Jefferson each were instrumental in their own way to help persuade the colonists to engage in an almost impossible war to win. Write an informative essay that describes what each man did and how he did it to turn the hearts of the colonists toward the American Revolution. So we're focusing on the rhetoric. So ethos, pathos, logos of Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, and Thomas Jefferson. So we're going to go to the discussion board first, and nobody has to be the first one to respond. And so here's one of the comments about Patrick Henry. I discovered that Patrick Henry used more logos in comparison to pathos. Furthermore, I found that Thomas Paine used pathos too. To illustrate, Thomas Paine states, I once felt all that kind of anger, which a man ought to feel, against the mean principles that are held by the Tories. The quote makes the audience feel anger towards the Tories too, in my opinion. So, do you agree with the first part of this statement that Patrick Henry actually used more logos than pathos? Okay, can you just be a little closer to the mic? I didn't quite hear that. Can you repeat that? Okay. What other logos can we find in Patrick Henry's speech? Okay. Very good. He makes it easy, doesn't he? Says it's logical. Very good. Would you say that at what point does Patrick Henry maybe use some of that pathos? Is there any pathos in the logos he uses? Is it possible to be both? How so? Okay. Very good. Okay. Let's take another look at what somebody else said from Patrick Henry. Um, here's ethos that he said. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? He is telling the colonists that if they don't go through with this revolution, they will remain slaves to the British. Then he talks about Patrick Henry was a big influencer for colonists to fight for their freedom. Do you agree that this piece of evidence shows ethos? I see Dylan has joined us. Dylan, can you hear us? Okay. Nice to have you with us. So we're looking at this quote. This student said that it's an example of ethos. Do you agree? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Okay. All right. And Morgan agrees and Luke agrees. Why? How is this pointing towards like an expert testimony? Nope, that one is pathos. Okay, the way I memorize them is this. We already discussed logos, and when Henry said that this is logical, that was the easy one, right? So logical means that you're appealing to the facts of something. And it could be either something that was proven through scientific means, or it can be a circumstance that everybody knows to be true. And so that's logical. Pathos is the one that appeals to emotion. If you think of the word pathetic, you're so pathetic. That means that you're full of emotion. And so that is where if you're making somebody feel good or bad, you're using pathos. So ethos, the third one, I like to think since ethos starts with the letter E, so does the word expert. And so it becomes the expert testimony. And a writer can use either the expertise of other people to kind of help support them, or if they've been through circumstances themselves and have lived through it, then they become their own experts. Luke says it is how he states and how he puts the ethic meanings to convince the people. So we need to step away from ethos being ethical. That's it's logical that logos is logic, and it's even somewhat related that pathos is emotional. But the E for ethos, you have to think of expert. Right. Credibility means that you have lived through something. So, because you've lived through something, we know that what you have to say is true. So, in that way, does Patrick Henry show ethos? I can hear the thinking going on. Mr. Short, how do you determine ethos, pathos, logos? What is your definition of those? Okay. And I really like that last definition, because if we look at this quote, is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? That's kind of an example of what you were talking about with diction, isn't it, Mr. Short? Mm-hmm. That's okay. I think it's important that we kind of understand, because this, see, at this point, what I've tried to explain to a lot of juniors is that there's a vast difference between English 10 and English 11, and it all comes down to this. It comes down to the understanding of how words are used, and we give you a little bit of background on that, but now you're really needing to see how it works. Morgan says it is how he makes his statements and how he uses loaded words to make the people think they have to do something. Very good. And that's pretty much what Mr. Short just said too. Mr. Short, are you cheating and stealing these answers from Morgan? Um, I don't think so. Okay, let's take a look at one more, because I think what's important here is the way that Patrick Henry is able to mix them so well. Somebody wrote, the speech to the Virginia Convention was truly inspirational. By using logical rhetorics, Patrick Henry was able to persuade the people that the war was inevitable and they needed to take a stand. For instance, Jefferson exclaimed, now I'm wondering if he meant Henry, I don't know. The war is inevitable and let it come. Moreover, Patrick Henry urged the crowd to prepare for the revolution due to the fact that the war was coming so quickly. Patrick Henry shouted, the next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. I love how these two kind of work in tandem. One is logical, one is emotional. Logical retorts such as these fueled the speech and convinced the crowd that the war was dawning upon them. Without the use of logical rhetorics, the speech would not have been powerful enough to move the crowd. So, this person is also saying how it's this mixture of logic with emotion that is what convinces the people. Okay, and taking a look at Thomas Paine, Thomas Paine also uses all three appeals in his speech. Ethos. But my secret opinion has ever been and still is that God Almighty will not give up a people to military destruction or leave them unsupportedly to perish, who have so earnestly and so repeatedly sought to avoid the calamities of war. So, and somebody had brought this up earlier, I forget who it was, that Thomas Paine uses God, a lot of references to God, and that then becomes a format of ethos, appealing to the authority. This is an ethos appeal because he says that God will help America through troubling times. Then he uses logos, but it will not do to sacrifice a world either to their folly or their baseness. The period is now arrived in which either way, the Tories or we must change our sentiments. One or both must fall. This is a logos appeal because he is trying to persuade the reader that fighting back is the best course of action. Then there's pathos. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. This is pathos appeal because he uses emotions to try to make the reader believe that the British are evil. So, let me ask you guys this. Did you find that Thomas Paine balanced ethos, pathos, and logos equally? Do you agree with that? I know Luke is typing. Dylan, do you believe that Thomas Paine was able to use all three styles of rhetoric kind of equally, or did you find that he used one more than some of the others? Okay. Brian, would you agree? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Mm-hmm. Very good. That's a good point. Very good point. Okay. Thomas Jefferson. Um, although why this? Some of the people had kind of pushed them all together. Patrick Henry uses the rhetoric pathos frequently in his speech to the Virginia Convention. He uses words that connect with the colonists' emotions, which would help convince them to unite against Britain. So he has the quote, "Give me liberty or give me death," shows how much he cared about his own and fellow colonists' fundamental rights. Thomas Paine uses logos to convince the colonists to separate from Britain. An example of this pamphlet called Common Sense. This was direct and straight to the point in how I wonder, I have a feeling I got the wrong quote here. Let me skip down to Thomas Jefferson. Oops. He explained to the colonists how it was common sense as to why we needed our independence. Thomas Jefferson used logos and pathos while writing the Declaration of Independence. This gave the colonists pride in their country and made other countries realize how important it was that we finally separated from Britain. What do you think about Thomas Jefferson's use of rhetoric? How did you find his use of rhetoric? Balanced, more in one direction than another? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson's rhetorical strategy? Morgan. Okay, and I believe this is referring back to Thomas Paine. I feel like he used pathos more than the others because he wrote about how we should have certain rights, which led people to getting angry that they don't have certain rights. That's a good point, Morgan. Very well written. But looking at Thomas Jefferson, what's the balance, do you think, there of ethos, pathos, logos? Thomas Jefferson, how much was he? Mostly ethos, mostly pathos, mostly logos, or did you find him balanced in his argument? Mm-hmm. Can you pull out a sample where he's showing that emotion, where he's using an emotional appeal? Some statement that seems very emotional. And we're on page 140 is the autobiography of the Declaration of Independence, by the way, if you need to find that in the text. Oh, the other thing you can do is look up the Declaration of Independence. The good part is all of these documents are online. Luke said, I agree with that. I feel like he did use more pathos than logos because he gave the people pride in their country. And that was the whole thing. It's appealing to that feeling of patriotism. Thank you, Mr. Short. Page 140, that's where it starts. And I don't know if you guys, did you guys watch the video clip that I had put in from the series John Adams, where it was John Adams with Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin drafting the Declaration of Independence? Did you guys get to see that? And if you can think back, what's really interesting is the balance there of the three men. Thomas Jefferson did seem in that a lot more emotional, didn't he? How would you describe Ben Franklin? Right, and he said, you do realize that if we're talking about this, even the slaves are going to have to do this. So he's, in his argument, he's using what? Ethos, pathos, logos. You think? If we, I think I can make the argument for ethos. Mm. So what I heard you say is that he's more logical. So that actually makes the argument what? Yes, that's logos. And you're very correct that Ben Franklin actually was the one who could manipulate that. He knew that with Thomas Jefferson, it was, and in fact, when Ben Franklin makes that recommendation that needs to be struck and changed, and Thomas Jefferson's response, I believe, if I remember right, was, that's what I felt, and that's emotional. And so the fact that the three men are working on, making this document as persuasive as it can be, you have that balance of ethos, pathos, and logos. Mr. Short, was there anything that you wanted to kind of add to our discussion about the three founders here, about their rhetoric styles, or anything that you wanted to add at this point? Mm-hmm. I definitely would recommend, if you guys can get it, maybe it's on Netflix. The series at John Adams is fabulous, and I'm hoping it's accurate, but I learned a lot from that, specifically about the rhetoric and how important it was, because they have to go to France. They have to convince the French government to help them. They have to kind of sort through how they deliver these messages. Rhetoric, this country was founded on rhetoric, and that's why it's so important that we study it now. So we're going to take a look at some of the specific devices here and make sure that you're all kind of cluing in on what this is. It is hard to kind of separate those ethos, pathos, logos, especially since they can be used interchangeably. So here's question one. Why does Patrick Henry state in his speech, "This is no time for ceremony"? What does this mean? Mm-hmm. So, Brian, what would this be an appeal to? And why? Mm-hmm. Very good. Awesome response. Awesome. Okay. Um, Here's a literary allusion that Patrick Henry uses. We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth and listen to the song of that siren till she transforms us into beasts. So the first question is, who knows what this is an allusion to? And do you know specifically which myth or which story? Mm-hmm. Okay. Dylan or Luke or Morgan, do you have more information to add to that? Okay. It's been a long time since you guys were freshmen, huh? Okay, what have we seen from Luke here? I think it covered it. Okay. This is actually from the Odyssey. And Mr. Short, you're so much better at this. I mean, I know the story of the siren, but you're better at telling it. Can you kind of refresh us on what the sirens were, and why Odysseus felt compelled to tie himself to the mast to go through and hear them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's pull that back in, because what was it about the Song of the Siren? Because that's where the illusion is coming from. How was it that you said that the sirens kind of invited them in and they would never come back? They would never return from that, right? Right, right. And that's what I think. I forget, was it Brian or Brian? You said that, I think, earlier. That's it. So that's it. So now that we know what the story is, and that's what Henry is alluding to, why is it so significant here? Mm-hmm. 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 Very good. And it's also kind of insulting too, because remember who if we're referring to Britain, they are the sirens. You don't refer to British as like females or beasts, certainly, but so this is the power of that illusion, and all depends on did the people who heard it or read this know what he was referring to. Okay. Um, Fine. So let's all turn to 125. If you have your textbook, hopefully you do in front of you, 125. And we are in, make sure we're in the Virginia Convention speech. Find one logical appeal and one emotional appeal. What are they and what is each of their effects? Actually, I think, Brian, you gave us one earlier, didn't you? And that is appealing to what? What is the appeal? Okay. Okay. Could it, and we're looking for a logical and emotional, could you classify that one as another one as well? Yes, it's emotional. Does it do either of the other two things? How so? Very good justification. Those justifications are what we're looking for. And so, anytime, and this is especially important when you're writing your essay, that you explain how the evidence that you choose represents whatever effect that is. So definitely that is a good justification for it being logos. I am totally sold on that. Okay, paragraph 2. Oh wait, we should go back and find a couple more. I'm sorry. Let's hear from Dylan. And Morgan and Luke, while we're hearing from Dylan, if you guys could also, what you could do is just tell us the sentence number. So if you kind of go through and figure out what the sentence number is, and then just give us the first 2 words. You don't have to copy the whole thing. But Dylan, can you find either a logical appeal or an emotional appeal in 125? Okay. And when we look and see what they is, there's Marshall and Ray. So I think he's talking about the armies here. Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world? Are we enemies? So Britain. Britain has sent the navies and the armies meant for us. They can be meant for no other. Very good. Now, which one are you qualifying this as, logical or emotional? Good. And again, work us through that. Why are you saying it's logical? Perfect. So the only logical answer to this is that they must be thinking of as an enemy. Okay. Luke, while we're reading through Morgan's, what you can do is just put in Google "Speech to the Virginia Convention" by Patrick Henry, and it will pop up for you. So if you want to do that for us, okay, thanks. So Morgan, they tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? What will it be, the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Good quote. Now, Morgan, what are you saying it is? Logical or emotional? Tell you what, while Morgan is typing, um, Brian or Dylan, what do you think it is? Well, if you look up it, can you all see the chat bar on the right side, the group chat? Okay, so Morgan put up the quote about "they tell us, sir, that we are weak." So we're trying to figure out which one that is, logical or emotional. He says that it's emotional because it seems like at this point he would be angry while saying this. Good. Okay. And then Luke chose this one. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery, and in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be freedom of the debate. So, Luke, which one are you classifying that as, logical or emotional? Dylan, what do you think that quote would be? Okay, this is good because Luke says it's emotional, you say it's logical. So, Luke, can, if I know, hopefully you don't have to type out too much, but why do you think it's emotional? In the meantime, Dylan, where are you seeing the logic of it? Right, very good. Okay, so Luke says it's emotional, and I know he's typing, but this is what the beauty of rhetoric is that words can act. It's even better when they can act in two uh, rhetoric styles at the same time, because there are people who are more like Mr. Spock and think more logically, and then there's others who are more like Captain Kirk and think more emotionally. And so the point is to try and appeal to both of them, and it's this mixture of them that kind of helps along with that. Um, please, yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. And that's ethos as well, too. Yes. Very good. And then Luke has said he's seeing the one that he said is emotional because it could be our country being free or our country being slaves to Britain. Definitely the emotional appeal. So it's working on both levels. That's the beauty of rhetoric, is that it operates on these multiple levels. Um, and it's kind of fun trying to figure out what they are. What are those levels? Okay, so page 132, we're going to look at the crisis now. And in paragraph 2 of that, on that page, what reasons does Paine give to persuade the colonists that not all is lost, even after the recent defeats? And what we're looking for here is what does he know about his audience? So think about who he's speaking to. In fact, it's in our build background when you look at page 132. In 1776, the Continental Army was exhausted, demoralized, and outnumbered by the enemy. Thomas Paine joined the army as it retreated from New Jersey to Philadelphia. And then on the way, he wrote these 16 pamphlets. So he's actually giving this to the Continental Army. So looking at the second paragraph, I think, yeah, paragraph 2 of the crisis. What reasons does he give to persuade the colonists that not all is lost even after the recent defeats? Let me go ahead and read that paragraph. Maybe as you hear it, you can see it. Whether the independence of the continent was declared too soon or delayed too long, I will not now enter into as an argument. My own simple opinion is that had it been 8 months earlier, it would have been much better. We did not make a proper use of last winter, neither could we, while we were in a dependent state. However, the fault, if it were one, was all our own. We have none to blame but ourselves, but no great deal is lost yet. All that Howe has been doing for this month past is rather a ravage than a conquest, which the spirit of the Jersey a year ago would have quickly repulsed, and which time and a little resolution will soon recover. So what reasons does he give that they were defeated? I'm going to wind up picking someone. Okay. He says that they were either too early or too late. That's good, Luke. Yes. It had to do with when they started. So what does he know about his audience? How is this going to affect the audience? What do you think, Dylan? Mm-hmm. And what is it about that audience that is going to make them do that? Excellent. Good way of stating that. Brian, did you have anything to add? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Great way of stating that. I see the word yet. If you see that, no great deal is lost yet. There's a wonderful, there's an educator out there named Carol Dweck, and she talks about the power of yet. But when you think about the word yet, there's hope in that word, in that not is all lost. There is still time to recover from this. And that's exactly what he's trying to say right now. Yes, we are defeated, but we're not defeated yet. And so that the power in words is so incredible. That's why I just love studying rhetoric. In paragraph 1, what evidence is provided as an appeal to logos? And then how would that affect the colonists? So going back to page 132 in paragraph 1 is, where do you see an appeal to logos? Very good. And can you paraphrase what he's saying there? Very good. That is correct. And those the summer soldier, the sunshine patriot are the ones. Well, as long as we're winning, I'm fine. But as soon as we start losing, forget it. I'm out of here. But he's saying that there are those who are saying we've got to stay in this no matter what. Go ahead. Yes, please, go ahead. Okay. Okay. I think part of what we were fighting with is that it is more pathos than logos, but I see what you're saying in that logos. That in order to win a big fight, one must fight hard. That is logical, yes. Um, but see, that's also the beauty of rhetoric. Even if you see this as a logos appeal, it may be emotional to somebody, but you may think, yeah, that's very logical. That's okay as long as it does the job. It's got to persuade. Okay. Looking at 1634, I'm sorry, question 6, page 134, I have this lovely painting, The World Turned Upside Down. What rhetoric do you see in this picture? What message is being told here? First of all, what do you notice? Let me see if I can bring this up real quick while we're in here. We only have a few minutes left, and I do want to get to this, and I want to make sure that I think it's Morgan without the book. We want to make sure that he sees it too. So the world turned upside down. And, nope, not videos, images. That's not here. Okay, let me see if I can find it by the artist. What Kinstler Inc. That's the Kinstler. There we go. Okay. That's a bit blurry. Let's do this one. Okay. So looking at the painting, what do you see? Just tell me one thing you notice. How do you see? Why are you seeing that? Wait, show me. Explain to me how you see that. Okay. So this is okay. Notice the difference between the two sides. How many soldiers do you see on this side? This one. How many do you see? Not that much, but over here, what do you see? Right. So much more, right? That's rhetoric. That's using the rhetoric. Because what is the artist saying? Right. Right. Yes. Is there anything else, any other detail you notice that may be giving a message? Right. They're smaller. They're in the background. These are more in the foreground. So this does give the message of being bigger and more powerful. Yes. Very good. You're looking down on them. So it does give this kind of hierarchy that we are higher than you. Very good. That's how messages are told in art. I noticed this, the cannon in the corner. What do you notice about that cannon in the corner? Because it's larger, right? This is actually the largest in there because it's in the foreground. It's the largest article in there. And so that means that this side has more power. Yes. So that's another way that rhetoric is presented. It can be presented in art format. Okay. We're going to be wrapping this up shortly. So I will let's just look at this final question here. Why do you think protecting the Declaration of Independence has always been so vital to Americans? And they made a whole movie about it when you looked at National Treasure, and they're trying to protect the Declaration of Independence. Why is it so vital to to American people? Okay. Dylan, what do you think? Okay. Mr. Short, did you want to chime in on this one? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, when we looked at what was that? The um, looking, what is it? The what was the first module of that article? The unhappiness one. Um, although I think that was the sophomore one. This is a concept that's new. It's not you wouldn't find this kind of quote in the Bible. There's no guarantee for happiness, but it's what our country is built upon. And the Declaration of Independence contains this theme. It contains this concept that is brand new and is unique to this country. And so it's and the rhetoric that is used to compose it is so important because it is the reason we exist in this country, what our country's all about. And Morgan writes, the Declaration is the very item that shows we are what we fought for, what we all fight there. The Declaration is what defines us as the American people. And I think that's a really good statement that we can end that on. So back to your focus question. So this is what you're actually responding to when we get into the essay. So in order to start a revolution, people must be persuaded to give up the routine of their lives, no matter how bad. Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, and Thomas Jefferson were each instrumental in their own way to help persuade the colonists to engage in an almost impossible war to win. Write an informative essay that describes what each man did and how he did it to turn the hearts of the colonists toward the American Revolution. This is actually, we're getting into the practice SBAC module, so you're going to be graded based on the SBAC writing rubrics. And so what's important in this is the evidence. All the discussions we had about each of these men and each of the documents that they produced have rhetoric in them. And that's why we were encouraging you to really explain how that rhetoric was working. Who was the audience that they were speaking to? How did that appeal work with those people? That's the part that you're writing in the body paragraphs. So this one is going to start out, this one will actually be 5 paragraphs, because each of your body paragraphs needs to talk about each man and his rhetoric: Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, and Thomas Jefferson. So what you want to do is pull the quotes that you think really demonstrate the best they are at the rhetoric. What rhetoric is their biggest contribution, and then show how it works. So that's what this essay is going to be about. Do you guys have any questions for either one of us about what you need to do for this writing task? Good question. Let's see here. Let me pull this out. Okay, I can look it up real quickly here. Let's see here. Okay. That sounds about right to me. Okay, the first draft is due the 17th, yes, and the peer reviews will be assigned next day. So, and your 2.33 does give you the information you need on how to write that. So it is, you have through the weekend and Monday and Tuesday, then it'll be Tuesday that it's due. And then Wednesday is when you have the peer reviews. Your peer edits are due on the 19th, and then the final draft will be done on the 20th, and then you can move into module 3. Anybody else? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need numbers. The discussion board? Okay. Yeah, and when I made up the slides with the information, it's just my students that I see. So I think maybe in the future I should also ask Mr. Short for some of his samples from the discussion boards as well. And while he's looking that up, this is just a reminder to my students that there's a way to double your points. So you guys have already earned 25 points for being in the Socratic seminar. But if you go back and do the tasks for the discussion boards, you can double your points if you complete all those tasks. So yeah, just know that that is an option. Keep. All right. Any other questions? Morgan said nope. Good. Luke? Yes or no? Nope. Good. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. This was a great discussion, and I will have this posted. You don't have to listen to it again, but it's there if you need it. So you guys have a great weekend and good luck. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.